Thank you for joining us for the Half Moon Bay Building Electrification Ordinance Workshop. I'm Krista Lynn, the President and CEO of the Half Moon Bay Coastside Chamber of Commerce, and we're excited to bring this workshop forward to allow the community to discuss the draft ordinance with city staff and learn some resources that are coming out of Peninsula Clean Energy. There will be time for questions at the end, and we encourage use of the Zoom chat. Thank you again for coming. Take it away, Veronica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica Bostonak. I am the Sustainability Analyst for the City of Half Moon Bay. I am really excited to be here today to talk to you all a little bit about our proposed ordinance and have a discussion with all of you, see what you think, answer any questions that you may have. I know it's been a hot topic recently, so I'm excited that you're all here today and taking the time out of your day to attend this with us. So thank you also to Crystalline from the Chamber. Thank you for co-hosting this with us and helping to make sure that residents and businesses are aware of what's going on and have an opportunity to participate, including with this workshop today. So thank you so much. And I also have Rafael Reyes here from Peninsula Clean Energy. He's going to be talking a little bit about some of the work that they've been doing with building electrification with other municipalities elsewhere in the county, but also some of the really great incentives and programs that they have available for Half Moon Bay residents. So thank you, Rafael, for being here today and for all the great work that you're doing with Peninsula Clean Energy. And we have some technical assistance here too, in case we get into the nitty gritty of everything as well. So without further ado, I'll get started. So I never like to assume that anybody knows what we're talking about here. So I like to start with very basic, what is building electrification? So this term, building electrification, describes the move away from natural gas and propane powered appliances. So think about your stoves, your space heating, water heating, dryers, any of those natural gas and propane appliances, the move away from those and towards highly efficient electric alternatives. There's a lot of really new, much better electric appliances out there than you may have experienced in the past. They're a little bit cheaper to run, more efficient. So now is a time, now more than ever has been a good time to move towards electric appliances. And you may be thinking, why are we even bothering doing this? It sounds like it might be a pain. It sounds complicated. Why would we do this? So one of the biggest reasons is climate change. I'm sure many of you have seen the report that recently came out from the UN saying climate change is here. And I know that's not news to anybody here in Half Moon Bay. A couple of these pictures over here on the right and everything that I have listed on this slide here. Increased wildfires like the CZU fire, intense storms combined with sea level rise causing coastal erosion. I know we've seen it, out by Miramar and these other areas where you see large chunks of the bluffs just falling. And all of some of the flooding that's associated with it and our drought conditions, we're entering a drought right now. All of this is extremely relevant to you all today, and something I know I don't need to remind you that it's here. We're seeing more and more of all of these things more often than you may have in the past. So climate change and the associated greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change are one of the big reasons that we're embarking on this journey. So talking a little bit more about greenhouse gas emissions, I'm also working on the city's first climate action and adaptation plan, taking a look at where the greenhouse gas emissions come from within the city and what strategies what can we do to decrease those to ensure that climate change doesn't go beyond what we're experiencing now and beyond to where we cannot adapt anymore. So on the right here, the state has some pretty ambitious goals for greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030 and 2040. And I wanted to draw your attention as well to the graph here on your left. There's a pie chart of where our greenhouse gas emissions come from in the city. You can see that there are two big pieces of that pie, one of which is probably one that you would immediately think of with gas-powered cars and transportation. I know we see a lot of traffic here on the coast. There's a lot of regional and statewide efforts to bring that number down. And the other big piece of the pie here, that 49%, is building energy. So because with that 49% of building energy, 80% of those greenhouse gas emissions come from natural gas use in buildings, both commercial and residential. So in order to make any sort of dent in that 49%, we really need to take a look at natural gas use in buildings and move towards electricity. Thanks to Peninsula Clean Energy providing greenhouse gas free electricity to all residents, all customers in Half Moon Bay and San Mateo County. That's the reason that this electrification measure is so powerful. We're able to bring that number way, 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 way down if we're able to switch away from natural gas and towards clean electricity. There are some other reasons beyond climate change. I know that's what I've been focused on here, but there are some real public health and safety reasons to do this as well. Anytime there's an earthquake, fire associated with those gas lines is one of the biggest concerns. And also indoor air quality. So I know we all know a little bit more about indoor air quality because we've dealt with wildfires, but you have to think about inside your house as well. There have been a lot of studies that show if you have gas-powered appliances in your house, that your air quality tends to be poor, and it can be linked to associated respiratory conditions like asthma and others. So we're not just talking about climate change here, we're also talking about health and safety and making this switch. So what does our draft include? We did a study session with the City Council in February of this year to talk a little bit about what sort of building electrification policy we wanted to explore. And city staff published a draft of an ordinance based on that direction on Earth Day, so April of this year. It is available on our city's website. I have a link here, hmbcity.com/electrification. There's a draft of our proposed ordinance there, as well as an associated FAQ. So I encourage you, this is a very, very high level overview of what the ordinance is, and I encourage you to take a little bit of a deeper dive if that's of interest to you. It's about 5-6 pages, so it's actually much less intense than a lot of other ordinances out there. So I encourage you to take a look and at least scan through it. But very broadly, this proposed draft would require all electric or all new buildings, whether they be residential or commercial, to be built all electric. And of course, we don't have a ton of growth here in Half Moon Bay. We need to take a look at our existing buildings in order to make that number go down. So number 2 is taking a look at those existing buildings and requiring that anytime a gas appliance is replaced, whether that be the end of life, whether you're doing a renovation, or whether you just want a different appliance for whatever reason, once those gas appliances are replaced, they must be replaced with electric alternatives. All of that moving towards number 3, which would require that all gas lines be capped or decommissioned by January 1st, 2045. So it's a little ways out, and you may notice this number is familiar to you. The last slide before, 2045 is where California would like to hit net neutrality or net negative emissions. So in order to get there, again, we have to address natural gas in buildings, and that's where number 3 comes into play. So number 2 is a gradual conversion, all in preparation for 2045. And last, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but of course, if you have questions, you can ask today or take a look at the ordinance. We've also expanded a little bit upon the requirements for both electric vehicles, solar panels, and the backup batteries associated with them in this ordinance as well. So before we get to the discussion, I want to pass it on over to Raphael with Peninsula Clean Energy, who will talk a little bit about some of the work that they've been doing and the incentives and programs they have to make this policy a little bit easier on everybody.
Great, thank you, Veronica.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share my slides here. Okay, that should be visible to everybody. My name is Rafael Reyes. I'm Director of Energy Programs for Peninsula Clean Energy. In my capacity as Director of Energy Programs, I'm responsible for all of our distributed work, meaning buildings and transportation electrification, as well as our solar and storage work. So I'll speak to the specific programs here in a moment, but first I want to provide an overview of what's happening in terms of the overall efforts, the rationale, and some of the considerations for this work. Most of you, I'm sure, know Peninsula Clean Energy. We're the primary energy service provider for San Mateo County. We are a public agency formed by a unanimous vote of all the cities and the county back in 2016. And in addition to providing cleaner power at lower rates and already saving $18 million a year for local businesses and residents, we also have a mission to reduce greenhouse gases by expanding access to sustainable and affordable solutions. First of all, just definitionally, what is a REACH code? It's a local enhancement to the state code. So the state provides a base code, and then local governments have the authority to make enhancements to that code. And we're, of course, here, as noted earlier by Veronica, talking about building electrification and EV charging. Part of the reason that we became involved is really in response to the request from a number of local governments who were looking for the support, and the research that shows that there are economic and performance improvements that can be achieved. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there are a range of benefits, including not only the climate benefits that Veronica spoke to, but also healthier and safer homes, and cost benefits or economic benefits. So just taking electric vehicles as an example, looking at 2025, we're probably looking somewhere on the order of $50 million a year in economic savings. And that's money that would go out the door for gasoline, instead staying in people's pockets, and as a result being invested locally. So very, very substantial economic opportunities. The work on electrification is happening broadly across the state and beyond. A substantial amount of work, for example, at the UC system, the University of California, where they did an assessment now, it's been a couple of years back, looking at whether or not they could do electrification. And this is a somewhat complicated slide, but what they did is they did an economic analysis looking at all their building types and the cost of construction and the operating costs. And across all their building types, they found that there was a lower cost to build, and the operating costs were essentially a wash. So each of these, there are two bars here for each building segment: academic, residential, and laboratory. The blue bars are the cost of construction, and you'll see it goes from light green with gas to the light blue with gas to the dark blue, and the dark blue is lower, so lower construction costs, and the yellow and orange are the operating costs, of the monthly costs, and it's basically a wash. And on this analysis basis, the UC system determined that they would move with all electric buildings from this point forward. So that's already committed, a wide range of building types, and quite informative study if anyone wants to dig into this. Now, a question has come up with regards to solar resources in Half Moon Bay. The reason this is important is it makes it even more affordable to go all electric. And I'm going to invite here our lead consultant, Doug Cott, to speak to this analysis.
Sure. Thank you, Raphael. As Raphael mentioned, the price parity for operations exists for all electric buildings as well as dual fuel. But when you couple that with on-site solar generation, of course, your operational costs can drop significantly. And, I guess the important thing to note here is that Half Moon Bay does have adequate solar resource to make that make economic sense. So you're in good company. Kind of broadly, we've included a few cities in here as reference. In one sort of foreign reference there where there's a high percentage of solar that exists in Germany, for example. But Pacifica and San Francisco, as well as Oakland, these are all great kind of example cities with similar solar resources that have proven the economic benefits of adding solar in with the all-electric buildings. So.
And the interesting note on Germany is Germany has very high solar penetration and very aggressive deployments, which is one of the reasons why it's an interesting case, even though it's far, far lower than Half Moon Bay. But Half Moon Bay is essentially a peer with pretty much most other cities in the Bay Area, and that's really the takeaway from this slide. Thank you, Doug. All of these, motivating factors have led many cities to adopt REACH codes already. So in here, we're talking just over the course of the past 2 years, nearly 50 cities and counties statewide, 13 in the county of San Mateo. Almost all of these are along the same model of all electric buildings with some exceptions, as well as increased EV readiness. And it's worth pointing out that already today, even though in California we use natural gas heavily, or methane, the primary content of that, if we look nationwide, some 50 to 60% of homes are already electric. So this is not something novel and strange. It's only relatively unusual in California because we've had such long time investment around use of methane in homes. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but one of the things to call out here is that while many cities have adopted REACH codes on electrification, they've also adopted a number of exceptions, which is to say there's been quite a bit of local customization based on local interest and needs and concerns. So cooking or affordable housing or ADUs. And so again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but we can certainly speak to these in the QA. The point being that there's a lot of opportunity within an all-electric code to provide customization based on local needs and concerns. Now, in addition to that, PCE has been offering now for local governments technical assistance around the REACH codes, but we also now for nearly a year have been providing technical assistance to developers. So through this technical assistance, we have a very robust portfolio of experts who have been involved in building all electric buildings of every type. And these, through this service, builders, developers, designers can come to us and say, hey, I want to build X. I'm not really sure how to do it. Please take a look at my plans and get in-depth technical assistance through this program. And that's all available on the website, allelectricdesign.org. Veronica mentioned incentives. We do offer a range of incentives. Here's a full list for EV charging. You can see, a number of different segments that are supported particularly for existing buildings. And I can answer questions on the specifics here, but a robust set of incentives available on EV charging. And then if we look at buildings here, looking at existing buildings, we offer incentives for heat pump water heaters through the Bay Rent Home Plus program. Layered on top of that program, so the actual incentive amount can be $2,500 or more. And then we have a low-income program with up to $6,500 for home repairs and electrification measures, and we coordinate additional support from other available programs. Not shown here, but coming is an on-bill finance program. So our executive committee has approved moving this to the full board. It's going to the board this month, next week. And we're expecting approval of the on-bill finance program, which is proposed to be 0% loans for up to $10,000 with 10-year terms, specifically for electrification measures, and intended to make it extremely easy by putting that finance on the bills, the finance payments on the bills, and highly streamlined process for securing that financing. We also offer programs in the solar and storage space. So one program is Power on Peninsula, which offers up to $1,250 per home for solar and storage systems. And then a local government resilience program as well, where we offer technical assistance and aggregate procurement. A last couple notes to address some common concerns. Frequently there's concern about, well, if the power goes out, I can still do what I need with my gas appliances. That is partly true, but it's less than it may appear. So most appliances today that are installed in homes require electricity to operate. So furnaces have typically electric blowers and other components. Water heating typically has electric starters. So for ignition and possibly pumps. Cooking has electric starters, although you can start it with a match manually. Dryers also use electricity for the tumblers and possibly other elements. So there typically is less resilience unless you have very old appliances that may still operate on gas only, which there are some. Most new appliances today do require electricity, which means, and the gas system is one of the first systems usually taken offline even before electricity in the event of a major emergency, like a major fire or earthquakes. And in addition, the gas system is slower to come up if in an earthquake there are any distribution failures like pipes breaking. So there's less resilience here than might meet the eye. And we can discuss that further. And then another common concern is there enough power? First of all, everybody agrees, we absolutely have a problem right now with power safety shutoffs and the disruption that those blackouts cause. It's important to note that those blackouts are actually being caused by climate change. So the increase in the fires and other issues is actually being driven by extreme heat and drought conditions. Looking at the grid capacity, we have done an analysis on how much additional load is produced by all electric buildings, and it's incredibly marginal. So less than 1% through 2025 and very, very small, continuing to be very, very small thereafter. And PG&E does not anticipate any challenges to the incremental added load associated with electrification. So the issue with power safety shutoffs certainly has to be addressed, and there needs to be more grid hardening for that. That needs to happen regardless. And then I would also note that the gas distribution system has similar problems, and more investment is required there as well. Again, happy to discuss further. And so with that, I will conclude my slides here and turn it back over to Veronica.
Great. Thank you so much, Raphael, for all of that really great information. So I just have a couple slides before we move on to questions and conversation. So, well, really just this one. So just before we start, I just want to say I've been taking some notes for some of the questions that I've seen in the comments, so we can address some of those. But if anybody else would like to ask a question or make a comment verbally, you're welcome to raise your hand and we can call you in order. I ask that you all keep it, I know there's a lot of us here today, so if you can keep it to like 3 to 5 minutes each, then we can make sure we get through everybody. And then if we have some time, we can go around again. So just making sure that we give everybody an opportunity to ask a question or make their comment. So before we get into that, and before I start to go over some of the comments and questions I've seen so far, I just like to frame the conversation in how can you help? Why are we here today? What sort of feedback are we looking for you all? We want to hear your reactions. We want to hear what you think. But of course, if you can provide edits or suggestions to the ordinance itself, that would be fantastic. I recognize that most people probably aren't used to digging through ordinances, writing ordinances, making edits. So there's definitely not a requirement. Any knowledge of current conditions and obstacles. As city staff, we have some idea of how old our buildings are, what things may be generally, but we don't know what's going on in your house. We don't know what kind of, whether you have a wall heater or central heat or air conditioning or not, or a gas stove, that's pre-wired. We don't know the situation. So if you have a situation in your house that you think might be particularly difficult or unique, we would love to hear about it and take that into consideration. Also share your experience with all electric buildings or new efficient electric appliances, whether they be good or bad. I know that a lot of people associate electric appliances with the electric stove that doesn't work very well, or a water heater that's really expensive. But there's, a wide variety, and we want to also make sure that there's nothing that maybe you've experienced in another area that we're missing. So if you haven't experienced either of these, I want to hear it. And then last, what are some of the most effective solutions for challenges? We recognize that this is a big challenge. This is a big policy, and there are some challenges associated with it. One of which being the cost. I've seen a couple people bring things up about incentives and low-income families, and cost is definitely a huge challenge for us to consider. What would be helpful to you? Would an incentive be helpful? Would technical assistance be helpful? I know Peninsula Clean Energy talked a little bit about what some of their programs are now, but are there other sorts of programs that you think might be helpful for your specific situation or someone you know? Again, power outages, we all know that we go through them here. What are some of the things that are most important for you to keep up in power? What are some of your ideas to make sure that we have power for what we need it for? Maybe some more resilience here beyond solar panels and backup batteries. And of course, any other concerns that you have that I may not have specifically talked about here. So just giving you all a little bit of an idea. I see a couple hands, but I do want to address some of the common things that I have seen coming through the chat. So one of which being, what is the cost per household? That is one thing that we're currently working on a little bit. We have some quotes, and we're working through making sure that that's accurate. So I don't have any specific numbers for you here today. I know Berkeley recently published a report that has some numbers for their buildings. So I would encourage you to take a look at that if you want to get an idea, but we will have some more numbers available in the future. Let's see, another question that I saw was there any exemptions for businesses? And as we have the draft currently written, there are no exemptions for businesses. So if there's a specific situation or instance where you feel there should be an exemption, I encourage you to either come raise your hand, tell us about it, or put something in the chat. So I guess I will take a break from talking for a second and we can, I see there's a hand raised from DS. DS, if you want to, Crystalline, if you want to help me bring them off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Hi, Veronica and everyone else. This is Dave Shorn in Kehoe, Casa del Mar. Thanks for the opportunity on this. First, of course, I support strongly efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's a very critical effort, as you mentioned, but I will take this opportunity to suggest to city staff, especially your sustainability folks, that in addition to electrification, another component is more fraught even, and that is limiting and eliminating and stopping large developments, specifically the Hyatt and Dunes Beach. Those large 100,000 square foot projects will inevitably increase greenhouse gas emissions. And at the risk of getting sued, at the risk of changing planning codes, those projects cannot be allowed to go forward because they are not compatible with reaching a net zero status in our city or our region. That said, regarding the electrification, I agree it's a good idea, but an absolutist 100% ban is not a good idea. There need to be some exceptions, as have been done in other communities. And that exception is for cooking. For activities of space heating, water heating, clothes drying, and even running your oven, electricity and gas are functionally equivalent, so swapping makes no sense. Swapping makes no difference and imposes no burden on people. However, cooking is different for several reasons. I just recently lived in a house that had no natural gas service, but we ran our gas cooktop for nearly an entire year on one 5-gallon propane bottle. So the contribution of cooking to the emissions from gas consumption is really small. I would imagine under 5%. So I would suggest that you focus on picking the low-hanging fruit. There's also the preferences to cook on gas, and I'm sure you're going to hear some squawking from restaurants that cooking on electricity in an industrial kitchen is just not an appealing way to go. But there's a much more compelling reason to give people the option to remain on gas for cooking, and that's really public health. In the event of the inevitable and increasingly common public safety outages or other natural disasters, people can't cook if they have an electric stove. If you have a gas stove, you can continue to prepare food. So that's a public health risk which must be concerned. And even more important, please consider the not improbable situation that during a power cut, our water utility also experiences a malfunction, which would result in a drop in service line pressure, potential cross-contamination, or other events which mandate and require a public health advisory known as a boil water advisory. You can't boil water if your electric stove isn't working. So again, in the situation of a disaster where, assuming the gas lines remain intact, you can still sterilize your water, which is a major public health concern. So exempting cooking appliances from electrification makes a lot of sense to me. Other concerns: it will be necessary for the city to work closely with PG&E and Peninsula Clean Energy to change the baseline quantities allowed in the billing tiers, because as electricity use goes up, if you shove that into higher tiers, people's electricity rates are going to skyrocket. Most people don't understand their electricity bills, and they don't understand why that extra fridge in the garage is costing them $150 a month. But that's because you're pushed into an upper tier. And again, as others have mentioned, we want to make sure that for any increased additional electricity load, that the source of those electrons is not carbon-based fuels. So those are my three main points: exempt cooking appliances from electrification for preferences, convenience, and public health concerns; ensure that baseline electricity usage rates and tiers are adjusted; and ensure that increased electricity demand comes only from non-carbon sources. Thanks very much. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much for all of those comments. I don't know if Doug or Raphael, if you have any interest in addressing any of those points. I have written notes down, but great. So another question that I saw come up in the chat in the beginning was about studies that have to do with solar panels and how they work in coastal air. So I don't know, Doug or Raphael, if you have any knowledge of how the coastal air, I'm assuming this is talking about the salt and the wind that tends to degrade things much faster here on the coast than we see elsewhere.
Yeah, I can happy to speak to that. Solar panels are generally made of materials that are non-corrosive, glass and aluminum. So the salt air doesn't have the same deleterious effect as it would for other metals. Solar is commonly used in coastal applications, especially in remote areas, for purposes of providing power. And we did include in the slide earlier kind of the adequacy of solar resources available to Half Moon Bay. Of course, it's not always going to be there, but that's there are times of the day when solar won't be generating, but there are also times and adequate resources throughout the year that indicate that it's a useful and beneficial commodity to have, especially in helping to lower overall costs for all electric buildings.
Great, thank you. I know that's definitely on the top of people's minds. I see we have another hand raised. Crystalline, do you want to help me unmute James?
Hi, this is Jimmy Benjamin. I don't know if you can see me. I imagine you can hear me. So I'm a member of the Planning Commission, but I'm speaking today as an individual. Thank you very much for having this meeting, and thanks to the Chamber for supporting it, distributing information about it. I want to just pile on to Doug's comment earlier and share my personal experience. I've had sun power panels on my roof since 2016, and they have experienced no degradation as a result of salt air, wind, rain, fog, whatever it is that we've had for the last 5 years. I left comments in the chat. I don't want to be redundant. So just wanted to thank you and respond to the question that Doug had mentioned.
Great, thank you so much. I think you cut out a little bit in the end there, but I think you were directing people to some of your comments in the chat in regards to your experience. So thank you. All right, if anybody else has any questions or comments that they would like to make, I don't see anybody else's hands raised, so please.
Veronica, I want to jump in on the question
sure.
of increasing the baseline. I was just confirming with some colleagues, and that is that if someone goes all electric, yes, they can adjust their baseline on their rates to address the cost increment that can occur from the increased load. And in general, as noted, the cost overall, because heat pump systems are incredibly efficient, they're at least four times more efficient typically than gas systems. The costs end up being a wash in most cases. And then adding solar reduces that further. So most people moving from methane systems, methane gas to all electric will experience a cost benefit, again, particularly if they install solar.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that Bill Bates would like to speak, but was unable to raise his hand.
Thank you. I will be doing a renovation of my 1,100 square foot home in Half Moon Bay. We've already decided to go all electric, which means killing the space heaters and removing a gas furnace, gas water heater, so forth. We will go all electric, which means batteries, of course. My question is, my goal is to not be a customer of Pacific Gas and Electric. Will there be any legal impediments to achieving my goal? Thank you.
The response falls to me. To be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. So today, my understanding is that, just about any system, actually, let me take a step back. Installing a solar system, even with batteries, will almost certainly require some grid service in most cases. And the scenarios are, you may not have 100% generation for all of your needs and need to draw some power from the grid. And even if you have a storage system in extended, cloudy conditions, you may not have enough generation, even if it was sized to be that way. And that's a function of the net metering state regulations around how net metering operates. Given that, I don't believe there's a ready pathway towards complete disconnection, but I would have to investigate that.
All right, thank you. By the way, everybody, be careful of your Nest thermostats and similar, because PG can reach in and control your use right now. Thank you.
Next, let's open it up to George.
Yes, hi. I'm a resident of El Granada, and thanks for hosting this. It's very informative. I've got basically 3 questions or comments. One, has this ordinance passed or is it proposed?
So this ordinance has not been adopted yet. This is proposed. So this is a draft, and I have a time. Actually, I can use this as a segue for my next slide here. We are doing public outreach right now. We have plans to do an update to the City Council at the September 17th meeting, and we'll bring it to the City Council likely in the fall. So there's still opportunities for more participation and comments, and it has not yet been adopted by City Council.
Okay, thanks. And then second question is to existing homes, to adopt this by 2045, So existing homes would only have to upgrade to electric when changing appliances, is what I heard. So I'm not sure how that would be enforced. I built my house in 2007 and put in a radiant heat system that uses water boilers that run hot water throughout the entire house, as well as to the sinks and the dishwasher. So replacing that with a heat pump, I don't even see a way, or an electric heater, a way that there'd be enough capacity to heat the entire house as well as the water. So my question is it only for existing homes would be when you replace something? Is that correct?
Yes, it would be when you replace something, and the most simple way to talk about enforcement there is at the time when people are filing for permits, they would need to have an electric alternative.
I see. Okay. Because that would probably require an upgrade to the electrical panel, the service panel, and that's extremely expensive. Nobody's really brought that up either. The not only the buildings, but the government is pushing for all electric cars as well. So every house having to have a charging station, and those draw a lot of current, hasn't been discussed here as well. So if the entire world is going to go to all electric, in the next 20 years, the 1% increase in grid capacity that I saw, that just doesn't make sense to me. If 49% of the greenhouse gases are coming from gas, why would that only lead to a 1% increase in capacity for the grid when the entire world goes electric in 20 plus years? There seems to be a disconnect there with the capacity for the grid. I mean, there's not enough capacity on the grid now with the brownouts, the rolling blackouts, all of that that's happening. Imagine if everything is electric, with electric cars, electric charging stations. There's going to have to be a huge infrastructure upgrade to the grid. So the question I have there is this 1% increase in grid supply that I saw as a slide. Could somebody answer that for me?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. I appreciate the question. So first of all, you're correct. I should include in that slide also EV load. EV load out to 2025, which is relatively near term, is also very small. It's approximately 2%. And the reason why these numbers are so small is our existing load is very large. So we're talking very, very large existing load. And so the increment here is very small. And if you take a look at an individual home, adding electrification and even with an electric vehicle might lead to a significant percentage for that individual home. But a lot of our electricity usage is heavy electricity usage is commercial. And there's a lot of existing load that this is growing on top of. So that's why that number is small, and that's on a total basis. Our outages actually don't really reflect the fact that the outages happen in very specific peak periods, and that's not where the added load for these things necessarily land. So there have been a number of analyses looking farther out to 2040 and so forth that basically have shown that we can manage the capacity growth for electric vehicles out for decades without incurring major load problems, number one. Number two is the cost of new generation with solar is going down and has been going down quite dramatically. And so we do have to bring more storage online and be able to get the renewable energy where we need to use it. And there is a lot of movement now in that area. So as a load serving entity, we're actually very confident that this is not going to be a major issue.
If I could add just to, or maybe reiterate one of Raphael's points there, when we're looking at electrification of end uses, it's when the electricity is used. That's what determines how the grid is sized. So think of it as like the suburban shopping mall where the parking lots are sized for that day after Thanksgiving. But most of the time they're under capacity in terms of their utilization. And that's sort of the way the electric grid works. The peak events happen in the day, as Raphael mentioned, but adding electric vehicle charging at night or even space heating at night in the cooler times of the day or year, it doesn't create the increase in capacity or the needed for infrastructure. And also, it may be worth noting that between now and 2045, there is a lot of investment that will be happening in regular operations and maintenance of the grid. So there is opportunity in the existing capital improvement budgets for grid infrastructure to address this within those budgets currently. So it doesn't add additional cost necessarily in the same way it doesn't add additional capacity need.
Okay, thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I would like to call on Miss Judy Taylor.
Good afternoon. Nice to kind of sort of see the sun today. I've got a couple of comments and questions. One is, have you taken into consideration what is happening with the HOAs? The fact that most of them have prohibitions against any kind of solar panels. Then in addition to that, with the heat pump, you have to have a physical space on the ground for your unit. That I can see is going to be problematic and needs to have some attention. One other thing is that I've not heard anything at all about what this is going to do to increase the service to the individual home. We have many homes that were built many years ago. They're not yet undergrounded. So when you do this new thing, you're going to have to underground. That is expensive. Some of the properties that have been undergrounded have conduits that are too small. So you're going to have to add panels in the garage or wherever your electricity service is. So it's not just the acquisition of a new appliance, it's getting rid of the old appliance, and it is the infrastructure that goes on behind the wall. You know, we do have houses in town still with tube and wiring, not a lot of them anymore, but we still do have that. So there's a lot more expense than what is just there on the surface. And then in terms of economic development, I'm very, very, very concerned. We've had 3 major restaurant events in our town in the last few years. Pasta Moon moved, then a new place moved into Pasta Moon, and then San Benito had the fire. With any of these kinds of things, with this ordinance passing, whenever it does, those restaurants would not be able to reopen with gas. And I think that needs to be looked at as well. Now, one of the things that I've seen some communities doing around this, which I would support a lot more at this point, is to have every house electric ready. So if I put in a new stove, maybe I have to add some wiring so that I can take my gas stove out and put in electric down the road. But to tell me that I have to use electric now and go through all of that expense now, it just doesn't make sense. And especially with COVID, we've got a backlog in appliances. People are waiting 4 and 5 months and not getting the refrigerator that they want. So there's just a lot of the nuts and bolts around this that I would prefer to see the city take a little bit more time with. I don't think they're going to give us a badge for being first out of the gate with this. So thank you.
I'm happy to start to answer some of those. I note that you mentioned the HOA's prohibition on solar. I believe it was AB 634, so Assembly Bill 634 passed in 2017 that prohibits HOAs from allowing residents for household purposes to install their own solar systems. There is an action step that's needed if it's a shared roof as an asset, where a solar allocation study needs to be performed, but the HOA cannot prevent solar from going on a common roof for individual household purposes.
Okay, let me just ask here before we go any further. The Coastal Commission is a carve out in many of these state things. Is the Coastal Commission a carve out? Or is the coastal zone a carve out in those regulations on this? Do you know?
No, no. I'll make
Okay,
it
good.
easy, Judy. No, that's
Okay.
that's a building code issue.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The comments around the heat pumps requiring physical space on the ground, that is true. There's typically an exterior unit and an interior unit for space heating. On the water heating side, it has a similar profile to your tank gas water heaters. So typically, but it doesn't need actually the exhaust flue that's used when you're burning gas in your home. So some things are a little bit easier, some things are a little bit more of a challenge from a space standpoint. So you're right, certain applications would require a little different technical solution. There are water heating solutions that also have a remote compressor as well. So definitely different products out there currently, sort of state of the shelf technology today. And through the life of the ordinance between now and 2045, there'll be more and more products available. The wiring and service in the home, of course, does need to be assessed by a licensed professional, and anything with knob and tube wiring probably needs to be removed from the community anyway. But I know that PCE does actually offer some additional incentives associated with upgrading the infrastructure in your home. And the last comment I think I understood there was on the restaurant side. There is adequate technology for almost every application in a commercial kitchen. Many of the world's greatest chefs sort of exclusively cook on electric. I'm sorry to hear about the events in the community, but it is interesting to note that most home fires, so maybe this relates to the restaurant as well, are a function of cooking. Something like 70% of fires in homes are a function of cooking these days, now that there's less smoking inside. But so it seems to me that sort of rebuild option for a kitchen may actually create a better healthier environment and potentially a safer environment. There are obviously significant costs associated with new equipment in any kitchen, but the electric equipment is available and seems to be satisfactory from the kind of professional chefs of the world and commercial kitchens. So, but excellent kind of questions in there. I don't know if there's more to respond there.
Well, I would like to acknowledge the time is currently 2:53 for those who need to have a hard out at 3 p.m. So I would like to hand it over to Miss Adrian, who's graciously had her hand up for a very long time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Adrian Netherton. I'm a Half Moon Bay resident. Some of you know that I also have some other roles within the San Mateo County community, and I want to be very clear that I am only representing my own opinion here with my following comments. I want to commend the city staff and leaders for really putting forward a bold proposal to not only stop digging a deeper hole by preventing new buildings from installing natural gas infrastructure, but also seeking to dig out of the hole by eliminating natural gas from our existing buildings by mid-century and getting started today. I think with the report that was released earlier this week, we all know that it's what needs to be done. And the biggest question is, how do we do it? And so my biggest concern with the proposal is not, putting an end date on natural gas. I think that's really a great signal for us to give to the market. But how do we do that feasibly and equitably for existing buildings? So my personal experience over the last several years as a homeowner has demonstrated that converting natural gas appliances to electric does take considerable time and expense. And I would be very happy to talk with staff about that experience to help give some reference points for costs. I live in the Sea Haven neighborhood in a home built in 1971, so I've probably got a pretty good case study for a lot of Half Moon Bay homes and vintages. Our family is really privileged to be able to afford these changes, and I recognize that a lot of people in our community cannot. That said, I'm super happy to have eliminated combustion appliances that would put my young son at risk of asthma, and to have solar and battery backup so we aren't worried about any of those outages. What I would like to suggest is that the city commit to creating a plan within the next few years that ensures that everyone can make this transition cost effectively, and that we won't saddle community members with high costs or dangerous unpermitted replacements or the health impacts of continued natural gas equipment. To say that a plan will be in place just 1 year before the final phase out deadline is far, far too late. I recently learned of a really great Menlo Spark report called Gassed Out, which provides some suggestions for an equitable transition that would encourage Half Moon Bay to consider, such as partnering with Peninsula Clean Energy to provide discount direct install services for emergency water heater and heater replacements, particularly for low income households. Some other things that we might consider as either additional or alternative options to make the transition possible would be requiring a home energy score or home energy audit at the time of sale or transfer, which helps improve energy awareness and gives people a reference point similar to MPG ratings for vehicles, so that the market starts to value climate-friendly homes and buildings. Requiring all electric for high dollar renovations, electric ready infrastructure and kitchen or laundry renovations, capacity for full building electrification with any panel upgrades, and potentially solar installations on new or expanded roofs over a certain size. And then additionally, we may want to consider building codes that address other areas of sustainability, such as water efficient devices and gray water systems or gray water readiness, and improved fire resiliency through home hardening or fire resistant materials. And just one last comment, there were some questions earlier on the option of keeping gas cooking, but not having all of those other natural gas end uses. And I think that really misses the opportunity. It's a very low greenhouse gas emissions impact, yes, but having any gas equipment retains all of that risk and all of that cost of the infrastructure. So new buildings are going to have requirements for solar and battery. They're going to provide that resiliency. And meanwhile, something that I did before I had the battery backup was have a propane camp stove for emergencies to cook on or boil water on. It's super small, easy to store, really low cost. You've got something to take when you go camping, and you've got something for resiliency backup. So I think that's really accessible for most people. So I apologize if I've gone on too long, but thank you for the time and consideration and all of the excellent efforts that have gone in so far.
Thank you very much. It is currently 2:58, so I would like to just do a time check-in. We will keep the Zoom up until the conversation is concluded, but I do want to acknowledge those that need to be done at 3 p.m. And if anybody else has a question, please feel free to raise your hand. And if there are no questions, I see one, but I do want to acknowledge that the chat, there's so much amazing conversation going on in the chat. So many great thoughts and ideas and information. And the chat will be saved and given to Veronica for her to go through while working on ordinance thoughts and notes. So I just want to let everybody know that will be saved. As you saw when you came in, this is being recorded and it will be on the Chamber's YouTube page in the next couple of days if you need to refer back to it. And if I can get my grubby little hands on the slides, I will make those available as well. So I just want to acknowledge those. And for those of you that need to leave at 3 p.m., thank you so much for coming. And for those who can stay, we will continue on. And the next person who had their hand up was Mr. James.
Hi, this is Jimmy. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
That's great. So I should report that I've been getting a lot of dropouts. I don't know if it's just my local bandwidth, in which case I can just thank Comcast. But I hope that the video will also be visible so that I can hear the things that I did not get to hear. I posed some questions on the chat that might be of enough interest that I ought to repeat them here. The first one was with respect to PG&E's program for encouraging the adoption of solar and battery. They sent out a flyer a couple of months ago, I guess it was, that talked about calling someone at Sunrun. And we are interested in the battery backup solution because we already have a solar provision. Unfortunately, we were told that unless we added more solar to our home, we could not avail ourselves of the battery part of that program. And since a battery backup is at the heart of local resilience, I wonder if there's any consideration for allowing your early adopters who already have a pretty good sized solar system in place to participate with batteries, but not additional solar. Thank you.
Yeah, let me speak to that. So through our partnership with Sunrun, we do offer incentives for implementing solar and storage program systems on homes. And Sunrun is in the process of rolling out a retrofit option, meaning that you would be able to get a battery system for an existing solar system. They are starting first with Sunrun customers, and then we'll move on to other non-Sunrun solar systems. And that's still forthcoming, but should be available soon. So my recommendation is, if that contact that you had was, sometime back, to circle back around in a couple of months and check again. And if there's still some confusion, feel free to contact me directly.
Yeah, thank you. Next follow-up question was resilience at the city level. I wonder if there's any thought within Peninsula Clean Energy's service district to support resilience against PSPSs or other shutdowns by having microgrid, megapack kind of implementations. It seems like it would be a really powerful value add for PCE.
Yeah, so we are working with a number of cities, including Half Moon Bay, looking at specific sites where we can develop resilience at those specific sites. We're in the first phase of that and expect this to be an ongoing effort. And I do anticipate that down the road, we will be looking at larger microgrids. We're not at that point yet, but we're working towards that.
Yeah, I'm getting a dropout, so I appreciate, I think I heard you say it's ongoing and basically, like the battery system, kind of watch this space. So I appreciate that. I don't want to be an air hog. So again, thank you for the time. I look forward to the answers to the other questions on the chat.
Thank you, James. And now I would like to call on Space Odyssey.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make the comment that I had both electric in my home and I converted to natural gas. And I will say that my electric bills used to be exorbitant and my house was never comfortably heated. And the best thing that ever happened to my house was natural gas. And so I'm very much distressed when I see these different ordinances being proposed to go off natural gas. My second comment is that I don't even think the quality of heat inside a home is the same. I think you get a better quality of heat inside the home with natural gas. And then I ask myself also, you're going after the small homeowner and the deadlines, and if they make if they have to buy new appliances and what they're going to have to do to retrofit. I understand that the 5G networks that are used for all the video games and everything, like no one's going after the big people, and it's all the small homeowners that are being targeted. And the other question I've noticed is people who look for alternate energy is that when I see solar panels go up, for one thing, there's not a tree in sight. In other words, they are taken out. And then finally, I ask myself, how did they ever get to re-roof their roof with the panels on top? So I'm really distressed over these ordinances with going to alternate energy. Thank you.
And I can respond with regards to the electric appliances. First of all, everyone agrees that the older style electric appliances were horrible. So, everybody knows the stoves with the curled, burners and everything that are very slow. That's what's known as resistance electric. There have been, many older homes were used resistance electric space heating or resistance electric water heating. This technology is old. It is very expensive. It uses an enormous amount of electricity. And so it's completely understandable that you were dissatisfied with that and happier moving to gas. Heat pumps are a totally different animal. They're actually very familiar. Your refrigerator runs on a heat pump. Air conditioning runs on a heat pump. And what it does is it moves heat from one place to another. It's incredibly efficient. And it's getting better all the time. In fact, the newest technology available today is very, very good. So I completely understand your experience. Those appliances really were horrible, but we're talking about something much better.
Thank you again, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate all of your insight, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, everybody, for attending the Half Moon Bay Electrification Workshop. If you have any questions or concerns about the forthcoming ordinance, please feel free to reach out to Veronica. Her information is on the screen, and she will help you as best as she can. Thank you. Have a great day.